Okay, let's get the ball rolling here on factoring perfect cubes. You have worked before with factoring the difference of perfect squares. Okay, so if you have x squared minus 4, you split it up into two parentheses. You know one's a plus, one's a minus. The square root of x squared, x. And what's the square root of 4? 2. And so when we factor x squared minus 4, this is what we're going to get. Factoring perfect cubes is different because we can have a plus sign in between there, or we can have a minus sign in between there. And the pattern is, we're going to talk about the pattern that you follow when you have perfect cubes. Here's a list of the perfect cubes up through 10. Would be helpful if you had most of these memorized. It just makes things a lot easier to recognize. 1 through 5 should be fairly easy for you. Number 10 should be easy. And then it's just 6, 7, 8, and 9 that may be a little bit of a challenge for you. So here is the pattern that we have. In this case, we're going to have the sum of perfect cubes. And the sum of perfect cubes, well, if you have a cubed plus b cubed, first off, you start by putting a plus b in a parentheses. And you notice how that's a plus and that's a plus? They match up, right? And then inside the other parentheses, you're going to have a trinomial. You square a, and you square b. And then this is the part where you get a minus sign, and that part changes when you have that part changes on the next example. And then here in the middle, you just multiply a and b. And you know, I said this part changes. It's always a minus when there's a plus there. It changes when there's a minus sign that you start out with. So anytime that you are adding, those perfect cubes, and then you try to factor, this is the pattern you use. Let's go to the next slide and try one of these here. So basically, first off, you identify, you identify that this is not perfect cubes. That's x squared. That's not a perfect cube. Let me go ahead and change this situation here and make that x cubed. There we go. So is this a perfect cubed? Yes. Is 125 a perfect cubed? Yes, it is. So what we're going to be actually looking at here is we're looking at x to the third power plus 5 to the third power. And once we can look at it like this, it should be easy for you to recognize what a and b are. A is equal to x, b is equal to 5. Okay, once you have that, and then you just basically plug things in. It's a plus in between, so the first parentheses is a plus, and you just add a and b. Square a, and then since it's a plus at the original, what we started with, this is going to be a minus, and then you multiply a times b. In this case, what is 5 times x? 5x. We're going to add, and what is b squared? Well, that would be 5 squared, right? Which is 25. So there you go. You have it factored. Now this is a trinomial. You should see if you can break it down into two parentheses. Can you give me two numbers that multiply to give you a positive 25 that add up to give you a negative 5? I don't believe so. 25 times 1 adds up to give you 26, and 5 times 5 will add up to give you 10. And if you make both of those negative, they just add up to give you negative 26 and negative 10. So here's the factored form of x cubed plus 25. Now, how does this change if this is a minus sign? It only changes with a couple signs. The first parentheses will become minus, and then this is a plus. That's really the only difference between if you start out with a plus or a minus in that position. So let's look at an example here. In this example, it says factor the polynomial. So are these perfect cubes? 8. 8 is a perfect cube of 2. X cubed is a perfect cube of x. And so I've just taken 8x cubed and I put it in parentheses to make it 2x in parentheses to the third power. And how about 64? 64 perfect cubed, 4 times 4 is 16, times 4 is 64. So it is a perfect cubed. And so now that you've identified that those are perfect cubes, a is equal to 2x and b is equal to 4. And let's start off. Since this is a minus sign, the first parentheses will get a minus sign. And then you'll say a minus b. Second parentheses, a squared. Well, remember that we are going to have 2x squared. And what is 2x squared? 2 times 2 is 4, and x squared is x squared. Since we started out with a minus sign, this part of the second parentheses becomes plus. And now a times b, what is 2x times 4? That would be 8x plus, and what is 4 squared? 16. And that is what we have there. I can tell you that at the very beginning we could have noticed that we could have factored out an 8. If we would have factored out an 8 there, that would have also simplified some things. But let's look here. I know that out of 2 and 4, I can factor out a 2. So when I pull the 2 out, it comes outside of the parentheses, and leaving me with x minus 2. And then out of 4, 8, and 16, I can pull out a 4. And that leaves me with x squared plus 2x plus 4. And now since all these signs are multiplication, 2 times 4 is 8. And now we're getting down to the completely factored form. This is the completely factored form of 8x cubed minus 64. And you might wonder what I was talking about factoring out 8 at the very beginning. Well, if we factored out 8 at the very beginning, that leaves us with x cubed minus 8. And this is perfect cubed, and 8 is a perfect cubed. And so you just basically, you still follow this same pattern to do x cubed minus 8 instead of what we did. Either way, we'll get you down to the final factored form. So whichever is your preference, as long as you get the final factored form. But 2 more examples. I'd like you to try these on your own. Here's the first example. Try this one on your own. Hit pause, then watch my solution. Okay, we have to factor this. I know this is a perfect cube, this is a perfect cube, and this is also a perfect cube. So this is really going to be 3m. Sorry about that. That's 3m to the third power, and this is 2 to the third power. So this is a, and that would be b. So it's a plus. We're going to have a plus there. A plus b goes inside the first parentheses. This part is going to be a squared, so let's square that. That's going to be 9m squared. Then we have a minus, since we started out with a plus, this part's minus. And then what we're going to do is we're going to multiply a times b to get that middle term. 3m times 2, 6m. And then now we just square b. I can't factor anything else out of here as far as a number or a variable. But let's look here. 9 and 4 make 36 when we multiply. Can we find two numbers that multiply to give us positive 36 that add up to give us negative 36? So they need to add to be positive 36, add up to give us negative 6. Don't think that's going to happen. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not going to happen because our lowest factor is going to be negative 6 here. And of course, when we add that together, it's going to be larger. So we're not able to factor the trinomial any further. This is the final factored form of 27m cubed plus 8. In the last example, try this one on your own. You should always try to factor out numbers or variables first as much as possible. Kind of like our second example where we should have factored out the 8, would have made us smaller numbers to work with. I believe this one here. Try it out on your own, hit pause, and then hit play when you're finished. Oh, if we look here, we are going to factor out a 3, because 3 goes into 3 and 3 goes into 24. So 3 goes into 3 once, leaving us with leaving us with a cubed. How many times does 3 go into 24? 8 times. And I believe a cubed is a perfect squared, and 8 is also perfect. And I keep saying perfect squared, perfect cubed. 8 is also perfect cubed. All right. So what we're going to do, this 3 is always going to be outside the parentheses. So there's the 3, and here's our first parentheses. Since this is minus, this parentheses is going to be a minus. And then what we do is just minus those two. A minus 2. Second parentheses. Second parentheses will have a being squared. Remember, this is a, and this is b. Since we started out with a minus, we are going to go plus here, and now multiply a times b. A times 2 would be 2a. And then now square b. What is 2 squared? That's 4. Can you give me two numbers that multiply to give you 4 that add up to give you positive 2? I'm pretty sure you can't. So we cannot factor that trinomial. Since we cannot factor the trinomial, this is in its final factored form. And there you go. That's how you factor perfect cubes.